Lagos has been called the new fashion capital of the world by CNN and British Airways. According to BA High Life magazine, Lagos, this dynamic West African city of 17 million inhabitants, now ranks with London, Paris, Milan, and New York in terms of consumerist taste for fashion as well as innovative output. The fashion industry never sleeps in Lagos, from high-end fashion to mid-range bespoke fashion to roadside tailors. Every occasion from births to social events to weddings to funerals demands innovative fashion. But what is quintessential Lagos fashion? What has influenced the style evolution of the city through time? And what is it about Eko that has made it the fashion capital of Africa?
We like to have the best of everything. That's something that we strive towards. Yeah, being unique and standing out.
I think that the Lagosian wants to be the best dressed. Even when you're dressed down, you kind of want to be the best dressed.
There's a word that I usually use, and it's like, notice me or I die. Notice me or I die.
I went to South Africa. I've been to all the 54 Africa countries. But I will tell you, when I walk on the street in Kenya, people always say, Nike, you come from Lagos, you come from Lagos. You go to Uganda, they will be saying, you are from Nigeria, you are from Lagos. They don't know any other country more than Lagos. And that is why it's very, very important. Lagos is the head of the fashion, and Lagos is the place to be.
Long before contact with the West, medieval Lagos was populated by the local Awori fishing tribes that lived there in the late 14th century. The city was later colonized by the Benin Empire, which established a monarchy there. The local Aworis and their Beni kings created a highly sophisticated city-state in which every aspect of private and public life, including manner of dressing, was informed by the monarchy, a group of wealthy landowners, customary law, and religion. There was less emphasis on individuality and more on tradition. In this city-state, fashion was not for mere ornamentation. It was one of the most important elements of everyday life. The body itself was viewed artistically as a canvas to adorn with carefully hand-woven fabrics, intricate woven hairstyles, headgear, and jewelry.
We used our body as the canvas for creating fashion. We would paint our bodies with chalk. We would paint it with dyes that we would find from plants and different materials. Body scarification later came in a form of cutting the body. And from those patterns, we took those patterns and we actually applied them later to fabrics.
The creation of the fabrics used to make these clothes in traditional Lagosian society was not simply artistic. The fabrics themselves, it seems, had a language.
Adire was always used as a symbol, as a means of communication. So we're pretty much telling our stories through this cloth with just symbols, but then those in the know, of course, understand what these stories mean. And I think it's important that we tell our own stories, and because who else will?
History of Adire come from before I was born, because I'm a fifth generation Adire maker, and the whole Nigeria do Adire. The way they pass education to kids in those days, and that is how Adire is passed on to each person in our own society. This is the zero that represents water from Lagos. This is Shekere, the one that represents the music of Lagos. Lagos, Owambe, they always make Shekere. Then when your star is shining, Lagos is where your star actually starts shining. Without Lagos, nobody will know you. If you haven't come to Lagos to make your star, nobody know. In those days, if you are in love with your husband, you wear your adire that has little gecko. Then your boyfriend or your husband will say, oh, my wife is telling me I need a room in her heart. I need a room in her life, because the gecko represents, no matter how small the house is, you must find me a room.
Through fashion and dressing, indigenous Lagosians found artistic expression that documented their experiences.
Ashoke is purely woven. There's a lot of process involved. Back then, what they did was pick the wool, the cotton, they spin it into wool. Depending on the color of Ashoke they want to make, they dye it. And the dye process has different stages. If, for instance, it's a sonyo is a khaki brown one. They pick the bark of the tree, because then they never had all the soda and things that we use to dye now. So it was purely natural.
In the history of Lagos in those days, the king, even the king of Adele, before he will meet any important guest, he must wear his sonyo. I have some old photo of the king of Lagos wearing the sonyo to receive all these king of England, because it's a very, very traditional fabric. And the king of Lagos has to show it to the other younger king from other town and villages. Then the etu, it depends who is coming. If Queen Elizabeth is coming, he will show love by wearing the blue indigo etu. If it's to receive just ordinary head of state, he can use the sonyo, which is silkworm. And the thread, it takes so long to get the thread from the silkworm.
They had silkworm farms, and they would spin the threads from this that the silkworms produced, and those were used to make those ashokes that look so, they look really rustic, but they're actually all very organic, because the yarn that was used to weave them was silk, so they were actually pure silk.
Ashoke is so important that in the olden days, they never had any ceremony without Ashoke. If you were going to get married, you would have ordered your Ashoke, about a year or 6 months before, because of the tedious process to which it was made then.
Family tó ní tí wọ́n jọ̀rẹ̀ wọn lọ yà fún ní ọwọ́ tẹ́lẹ̀ máa ti fẹ́ ṣèyàwó tó ti kú bí ọdún kan yóò ti máa wọ aṣọ rẹ̀ àwọn kẹ́tí ọ̀dì ṣèyàwó tẹ́lẹ̀ wọ́n máa yọ sọ fún tí wọ́n ní wọ́n máa wọ aṣọ ní òkè pé tọrọ ẹ̀ wọ́n gbà ó wọ́n sọ̀rọ̀ tí wọ́n rò láàárọ̀ báyìí sọ̀rọ̀ tí wọ́n rò lọ́sẹ̀ wọ́n yọ aṣọ bíi méje láti òkè lẹ́yìn tí èlò papọ̀ mọ́ra wọn.
téèyàn bá fẹ́ joyè àálò òfin téèyàn bá fẹ́ ṣèkómọ wípé ìkómọ yìí lárinrin àmú aṣọ òfin fún.
It's like you wearing an art piece. You can imagine wearing a Mona Lisa. People will look at you like, oh my God, that's $1 million going there. So that's the same way I see Ashoke in terms of the importance of Ashoke in Lagos. People will not have their parties without Ashoke. They would, one way or the other, it's either the men are wearing the Ashoke cap, or the women have the gele and the shawl, the pele, and they want the tie on, on their waist. So you can't take Ashoke away from Lagos fashion.
This was my grandfather's funeral. Yeah, and this must have been 1968. And obviously, the Oleku that's come back was in then, the short sleeve buba, and we're all wearing a pinky Ashoke. And
this was pink?
Yeah, it was pink. This is a black and white picture, but this was actually a pink Ashoke, which was very unusual at the time. And we had these, you see, we're wearing bags. The bags with the long strap and the little short one, you know, and the little, that was really, really, if you had one of those bags, you were, you know, considered terribly fashionable.
The multicultural character of the city developed in the 19th century. The mid-19th century especially brought tremendous social change to Lagos. In 1862, Lagos was colonized by the British, who enforced many changes. Around the same time, tens of thousands of free, wealthy Brazilian, Cuban, and Creole men, women, and children returned to settle in Lagos, the land of their African slave ancestors. The city resultantly developed a hybrid new Lagosian fashion sense. In the late 19th century, fashion was even used as a tool for subversive and politically rebellious behavior. Herbert Macaulay cultivated an imposing handlebar mustache. His adoption of this European trend was of course in step with the fashion of the time, but also an open act of rebellion against Lagos's British ruling class. In his time, such mustaches were seen as the privilege of European colonizers. Macaulay would go on to form the first Nigerian political party and become the father of Nigerian nationalism. Colonial-era influence in fashion carried through to the late 40s with a boom in the industry of traditional and Edwardian colonial styles. The Industrial Revolution led to mechanical mass productions of items and textiles across Europe. A specialist company, Vlisco, was established in 1846 by the Van Vlissingens, a Dutch merchant family, to produce popular batik-inspired wax prints specifically for the West African market. Along with these wax prints came British, Swiss, and Austrian lace, and a whole host of other European textiles that were developed for the West African market.
Foreign textiles imported into Africa and into Nigeria have formed part of the local tradition, textile tradition and clothing tradition. The wax prints made in the Netherlands and Great Britain had a similar history, being manufactured and sold since the late 19th century. And a more recent example of this cultural textile exchange is Austrian lace, which was first imported into Nigeria, specifically Lagos, in the 1960s.
All you people walk around, nothing else to do. I want you to feel like I feel when the immigration knows your name. Nigeria, we hail thee. For proving our security.
1960 was a major turning point for Lagos and Nigeria. In 1960, Nigeria and its capital city Lagos became independent from British colonial rule. Lagos was agog that year, and to reflect the festive mood, Nigerians emphasized their Africanness, and traditional attire was worn proudly by statesmen and patriots.
For proving our security.
The Black Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, as well as waves of African countries gaining independence from their colonial masters, influenced the adoption of the fashionable big Afro hairstyle and ethnic dashikis among young people in Lagos.
From your sleep, Africa. Rise from your sleep, America.
At the time of independence, you'd have people, maybe as a sign of rebellion, would not want to wear the shirts and trousers and would rather just, wear their agbada or whatever. During the Independence Day, you notice that most of them really embraced it and they will have their full, the full regalia, sometimes with a cap. And for me, that was really profound because that was our starting point.
This movement connected Black people across all nations, a back and forth of fashion, with Blacks in America looking to Africa, whilst Blacks in Africa looked to America.
There was this emphasis on being able to express yourself in different unique ways, you know. A lot of Black people are coming from from the US, from the UK, and we were also traveling a lot to these places and studying and even just living. So there was a lot of cultural exchange at the time. You know, you had people like Fela, you know, he was on the rise at performing, and there were a lot of all these high life musicians whose music was being exported. And I guess if you look at album covers from back then, you know, there was a very cool edge to them, and they looked very international, even though you could also tell this was specifically West African.
Post-independence gave Lagosians more opportunities to study abroad. One woman, Shade Thomas Pham, returned to Nigeria after her studies abroad. Mrs. Thomas Pham amalgamated traditional Nigerian and Western style, creating a fashion hybrid that persists till today and has come to characterize modern Lagosian, Nigerian, and African fashion.
The Nigerian look, a mixture of traditional and modern that were made for each other. Nigerian designer Shade Thomas assisted with a production which brought to London some of the world's top models representing Commonwealth countries.
Shade Thomas was outstanding because she had also gone to the very prestigious Central St. Martin's in London, and she came back with the most amazing ideas to take African fashion to that next level. But I wouldn't even say that it was just that next level. She went several notches higher, and she was ways beyond her time.
She was the first woman to own a boutique in Nigeria, though had a hard time trying to convince Nigerians to wear Western dresses made with local fabrics.
I didn't find it easy because the elite, the Nigerian elite, didn't take it as quickly as the reception wasn't so easy. But the Western, the Europeans, they actually lifted it up with me, because at that time they too wanted us to grow, in fact, and so they helped a lot.
Nigeria became even wealthier with its oil boom in the 1970s. This new wealth was reflected in the fashions of Lagosians, the beginning of opulence for non-royals. The number of boutiques continued to rise according to the demand of socialites who were going out more.
Nnamdi Azikiwe and Broad Street at the time had interesting boutiques. There were boutiques at the hotels, Ikoyi Hotel, Federal Palace, what's the hotel that's in the center of Lagos, one of the Nigeria hotels. They featured a lot of boutiques.
I opened 2 shops at the Federal Palace. The Federal Palace was newly built, and I took the first 2 shops down there. Yes, I did. From there, I opened another one on Broad Street, and then go to Falamo Shopping Center. They never used the word boutique until I put it on the air, and then people were wondering what a boutique is, and they call it boutique, whatever, because they were not used to it.
There was a lot of money in circulation, and there was people were able to go really wild with their designing. They were able to bring in more materials that could enhance the clothing. Well, when I say materials and accessories and stuff like that, because most of them, they're not made in Nigeria, so you have to kind of source and buy them. And what people were wearing is how much money you can put down.
Basically, what a lot of people did to show their new wealth, they were buying luxury items. And one of the luxury items, or one of the most popular luxury items, was Austrian lace. It even hit such heights that it became scandalous.
At that time, when a woman can have Ashoke and everything, all the, for just 50,000 naira. At that time, 5 yards of those lace were already costing 150,000. From the way we dress here and the weather, we have to change. And for instance, you cannot wear something to a wedding last week and be seen in it the following week, which means you have to be coughing out. That's too extravagant.
Even Ebenezer Obey, he wrote a song about lace. Wole Soyinka wrote a theater play about lace. So it became a fabric that actually created discussion. It had a big social, cultural impact.
If you want to find these fabrics in Lagos society today, the best place to look is a Lagos wedding. Here, you would find the ashoke used specifically to mark the occasion, and also different types of lace which Lagosians have adopted as their own. And of course, in traditional Lagos fashion, the younger generation today mix these fabrics with Western silhouettes and styles, continuing our age-old tradition of intercultural exchange.
I think the greatest occasion for dressing up in Lagos is weddings. It's because it's an opportunity for each person to create a whole new outfit from scratch. Working with very high luxury fabrics, and creating pieces that, if placed on a global platform, would be considered, in some respects, couture. Because of the time that goes into it, it's purely for the individual, and it's purely to wow. You
also have the guys, and they're all like wearing white, usually in the traditional weddings, and again it's lace. So you see all these fabrics that you don't see in typical everyday life, and they're coming out there. So it's a lot of history, but then it's a lot of merging too, because they may even do something that is actually very Western or very European.
Brightness and the variety of different dress styles add a lot to the vibrancy of Nigeria and of Lagos specifically. I think it also speaks to the extreme tolerance of Nigerians and specifically of Lagosians, that you can almost never be dressed inappropriately. No matter how brightly you're dressed, somebody will always come up and say, "I like your dress."
Another fabric that has become synonymous with Lagos fashion is Ankara. Like lace, this Dutch wax fabric, manufactured for the African market, predominantly in the Netherlands, can be seen in everyday society. But it wasn't until the early 2000s that it became a fashion statement to wear Ankara.
At that time, I do remember, I think Obasanjo was in power, and there was this ban on the importation of fabrics, and so we thought the Ankara fabric, and then the Nigerian made Ankara fabric. The fact that it became quite a cool thing, I can use that word, I think even older people who had seen it in a certain way began to see it differently and wanting it in different ways now. So it's not I'm just wearing a skirt and a blouse to church. It's I'm wearing a cool Ankara dress to a party. I'm going out with my Ankara shirt dress, my culottes, and it's just fashion.
Pour me a drink and I'll tell you a lie, baby, what would you like to hear? That I'm in love with you and all the things you do, that wouldn't be sincere.
Today, Lagos is part of the global information age, which sees information, values, and data being exchanged around the world. The past decade has given rise to Lagos-based designers establishing followings both locally and abroad. This new wave of Lagosian designers are inspired by this postmodern megacity.
We're currently sold in Africa, in Johannesburg, in Lagos, in Europe, in Dublin, in Paris, in London, and in the USA, in Florida. Thankfully, working with in a traditional manner, using our traditional tools and our traditional wisdom, things that have been passed on through the ages, make for a more durable handbag.
There are designers that do stand out and are making, should I say, bigger waves internationally than others. The reason being is that it stands out, and at the same time, you are able to introduce it into your style, and it also speaks volumes about where it's from.
You need to have your own narrative. We can't keep importing and reinterpreting and, you know, guys, we're going nowhere. I tell designers this all the time. What is your story? What is your narrative? It's no longer about a collection. You know, fashion, I mean, for you to even succeed in Nigeria, to differentiate yourself, I need to know what your story is.
Designers like Maki O, for instance, who is using Adire in the way it was originally intended, like to push messages across, to now tell new messages, because those old messages are kind of frozen, you know. But I think in terms of linking us to our past and allowing us to send cultural messages out, you know, in the modern era and even in the future, we need to be able to really explore these things and take them somewhere else, so that people can know that we're bringing something that is unique, because you can't find Ashoke anywhere else in the world, you can't find Adire anywhere else in the world. So these are things that allow us to identify ourselves to other people.
You see the ordinary woman in the market, she's wearing a tattered blue. But when you look at the slippers, it will be in blue as well. And you look at the head tie, which is probably been washed many, many times, it will still be, the contrast will still show. Lagos women have always been very, very fashionable.
The heart of Lagos is really about carving your own path, making a statement. You know, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Sort of attitude.
There's so many people in Lagos that are not from Lagos, but try to argue with someone like me, who's originally from Ekiti State, and tell me I'm not from Lagos, and then you will know who, you know. So it's cosmopolitan. Lagos is interesting. Lagos is Lagos.
It is Eko for show. Eko is where all the parties happen. Eko is where you have your nightlife. Eko is where you have every excuse to dress up as fashionably and as trendily as you can, because you have to make a show.